The office still smelled faintly of burnt plastic from the router that fried last week, and the overhead lights hummed like tired bees. I was back at my desk after another long night of patching code, sipping stale coffee. When the elevator doors opened, out stepped Chase Whitman, freshly pressed suit, glossy hair, and that easy grin of someone who had never wrestled with a broken server at 3 a.m. His nameplate had been mounted before I even knew he existed, Senior Vice President of Strategy. He'd never written a single line of our code, but apparently strategy required nothing more than a Harvard diploma and the right surname. I'd spent 6 years building Nexora's core platform duct tape and Python at first, later hardened into the engine that now powered supply chains across 4 continents. Every patch, every late-night reboot, every missed holiday dinner was still lodged in my spine. I knew where every weakness was buried, every piece of logic bent to fit a client's demand. Chase didn't bother to ask about any of it. He walked straight into the conference room and started rewriting the week's agenda as though he were rearranging furniture. Vision alignment, narrative optimization, strategic immersion words spilled from his mouth like confetti, dazzling only those too tired to argue. Diane Mercer, my manager, nodded along, pen scratching obediently. Around me, the team avoided eye contact. They knew better than to laugh. I just listened, jaw tight, as he proposed renaming half the folders in our shared drive to make them client-facing friendly. By lunchtime, whispers had already leaked into the break room. A friend of Ethan's, my junior dev, had overheard Chase bragging on the phone. He had placed a bet with old classmates. Some drinking game made corporate he would land the $82 million Galaxy Systems deal without touching a single line of code just by owning the room. I stood there holding a paper cup of burnt coffee, feeling something colder than anger crawl under my skin. This wasn't just nepotism. It was arrogance sharpened into a wager, with my life's work set as the stakes. And I knew then the real game had only just begun. The agenda landed in my inbox at 7:12 a.m. Subject line in all caps. Galaxy Systems pitch, final run of show. I scrolled once, twice, then stopped. There it was in bold lead presenter Chase Whitman. My name wasn't even on the page. Not as presenter, not as support, not anywhere. 6 months of building a flawless demo. And suddenly I was invisible. I walked straight to Diane Mercer's office, the glass walls reflecting her neat bun and carefully pressed blazer. She didn't look up when I entered, just gestured to a chair like she was swatting away a fly. "Is this a mistake?" I asked. Holding up my tablet with the agenda glowing, Diane finally looked up, her smile fixed and managerial. "Not a mistake. We're letting Chase shine. He's a strong presence in the room, and Galaxy cares about optics. He's never touched the system. He doesn't even know the sandbox variables. The demo will collapse the moment he clicks the wrong tab." Her smile didn't waver. Optics matter more than details. I swallowed hard because the words tasted like poison. This wasn't about skill. It wasn't even about the deal. It was about propping up the Whitman name. Back at my desk, I opened the shared drive and stared at the wreckage. Folders I had meticulously labeled were now renamed things like Vision Sync and Next Gen Strategy. Dashboards with calm blues and grays had been switched to violent oranges for energy. He even added a widget that displayed fake machine learning stats. Numbers I knew would confuse Galaxy's engineers in seconds. I opened a fresh document and began typing. Line by line, I recorded every change, every reckless tweak, every potential point of failure. Not because I thought anyone would listen, but because I needed proof evidence that I had warned them. Proof that when the crash came, it wouldn't be on me. The cursor blinked back at me like a quiet ally. If they wanted optics over substance, fine. But substance has a way of crashing through optics when the lights are brightest. The first rehearsal felt more like a stage audition than a pitch. Chase stood at the head of the conference table, sleeves rolled just enough to show he was serious. tossing out phrases like AI-powered logistics and agile transformation at scale. None of those words had any connection to the system I had spent years stitching together. Still, Diane Mercer nodded along, scribbling notes as if he were reinventing supply chains instead of recycling buzzwords from LinkedIn posts. I sat quietly with my laptop open, the documentation file glowing on my screen. Bold red warnings marked every dependency, every fragile environment setting that would unravel if touched carelessly. Chase had skimmed it once, frowned, and then asked me to send him just a simple cheat sheet, something flashy he could memorize. I gave him the full 11 pages again, if he wouldn't read. That was his choice. Later that afternoon, Ethan Brooks forwarded me a screenshot from Slack. Chase had been chatting with finance, referring to me as the coder dinosaur still babysitting her scripts. My stomach tightened, not from surprise, but from recognition. That was always the strategy: belittle the work so it seemed replaceable, then step into the spotlight with empty hands. I closed my laptop slowly, letting the anger settle into something colder. Sabotage would have been easy. A single missing environment variable, a line of misconfigured code, and the demo would implode before it even began. But that wasn't who I was. If they wanted to underestimate me, fine. I would let the system speak the truth. I would defend it, not destroy it. The rehearsals dragged on for days, Chase strutting with new vocabulary each time, Ethan shrinking in his chair, Diane insisting the energy felt right. I said little. Instead, I made sure every wire was tight, every failsafe in place, every path logged. If Chase was determined to gamble with my work, then he could walk onto that stage alone and roll the dice. And I would be there, silent, watching as the stakes finally caught up to him. The conference room lights dimmed at exactly 10 o'clock, and for a brief moment, I felt steady. My slides were polished, the sandbox spun up without a hiccup, and the replica data I had crafted over months gleamed on the dashboard. Across the long table sat the Galaxy Systems team, their faces calm and unreadable, with Marcus Hayes at the center. His reputation preceded him: sharp, unflinching, impossible to fool. I stood, laptop in hand, ready to guide them through the system when a shadow cut across my shoulder. Chase Whitman stepped forward, hand outstretched, that gleaming smile fixed in place. "I'll take it from here," he announced. For a heartbeat. I didn't move. Then I saw Diane Mercer in the corner, giving me the smallest nod, cold and final. I let go of the laptop. Chase swung it around like a game show prize and began pacing. "Welcome, everyone, Chase Whitman, Senior VP of Strategy. I'm thrilled to show you the magic we've built." He gestured at the dashboard as though he had wired it himself. The system threw its first warning: variable path mismatch. Please reset environment. Bold, blinking, impossible to miss. Chase ignored it, clicking forward with a flourish. The dashboard stuttered, then froze entirely, a spinning wheel pulsing on the screen. He tapped harder, sweat breaking at his temple, and finally looked up with unearned bravado. "As you can see," he said, forcing a chuckle, "this is exactly the kind of predictive power only a Harvard man can deliver. A Harvard man should present this deal, not a self-taught coder." The silence that followed was suffocating. Marcus Hayes leaned forward slightly, expression unchanged, while the rest of the Galaxy team sat frozen in their chairs. Diane stared at the table as though she could disappear into the grain. I folded my hands in my lap and stared straight ahead. The system had spoken. I wasn't going to rescue him. And 30 minutes later, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I sat in the parking lot, staring at the cracked asphalt. When my phone lit up with an unfamiliar number, against my better judgment, I answered, "Lauren Parker." A calm voice asked, "Yes." "This is Marcus Hayes, CTO of Galaxy Systems." His tone was surgical. "No wasted words. The $82 million deal is yours, not Nexora's yours. We know who built this." For a second, the world blurred. I gripped the steering wheel, steadying myself. He didn't need to explain. They had seen through the performance, the crash, the arrogance. They knew where the code had come from. I understand. I managed. We'll be in touch, he said, then hung up. Back inside Nexora, the building smelled of burnt coffee and cheap toner. Diane Mercer called me into her office without looking up from her screen. Obviously, yesterday didn't go as planned. Going forward, we'll need you focused on documentation, comprehensive, end to end, so Chase can onboard more easily. It was exile, dressed in HR speak. The message was clear. I was done speaking in front of clients. My work would be hidden behind Chase's glossy pitch decks. I nodded once. Of course. Back at my desk, I opened a blank Confluence page. Line by line. I wrote professional, polished documentation, clean diagrams, structured sections, perfect formatting. But in between the neatness, I layered fog technical jargon that looked thorough but carried no substance, references to deprecated modules, circular pointers that led nowhere, and then I built something new, Module 7, an air-gapped layer woven into the system, one that required my cryptographic signature to deploy. Without my key, the environment would spin forever, locked in place, untouchable, not sabotage, not malice, just insurance. If they wanted me invisible, fine. I could be a ghost. But this ghost would own the lock to the heart of Nexora's engine. The cursor blinked at the bottom of the page, steady as a heartbeat. I saved the file, closed my laptop, and knew I had drawn the line. And 2 days later, Chase tried to run the demo again. 2 mornings later, the executive conference room filled again, this time without clients, just Nexora brass and a handful of nervous engineers. I sat in the back row, silent, while Chase strutted to the front as if nothing had happened days before. The projector hummed to life, the dashboard booted, and I watched the loading icon spin. 10 seconds. 20. The warning flickered. Authentication key required. Chase clicked past it with his usual flair, pretending it wasn't there. The screen stuttered, then froze completely. The room grew still. He tapped the trackpad harder. Nothing. Someone coughed. Diane Mercer leaned forward, forcing a smile that wilted in real time. Ethan Brooks shifted closer to me, whispering out of the corner of his mouth. They're saying it's a technical oversight. Something in your old code. I kept my expression neutral, eyes fixed on the screen. They could call it whatever they liked. The truth was simple. Module 7 wasn't going anywhere without me. At the far end of the table, an executive muttered, "Galaxy's going to want answers." The investors are already pressing for updates. The words carried the weight of panic. Chase, sweat beginning to bead at his temples, tried to recover. It's just a minor glitch, a caching issue. He insisted, we'll iron it out. He didn't understand that the system wasn't broken, it was safe. Safe from him. Safe from anyone who thought they could strip my name off the work and still reap the reward. I folded my hands in my lap, saying nothing. The engine I had built was airtight. It could be extended, scaled, adapted, but it could not be stolen. Not anymore. Module 7 had seen to that. The meeting ended in silence, chairs scraping awkwardly against the floor. Nobody looked me in the eye as we filed out, but I could feel it. Their empire of optics had just slammed into a wall they hadn't seen coming. And by the end of the week, the whispers had already reached the boardroom. By Friday morning, the tension had curdled into something everyone could taste. Executives filed into the boardroom, eyes hollow, voices low. I wasn't invited, of course, but whispers carry. And Ethan had a way of forwarding the right Slack threads at the right time. Marcus Hayes had dialed in from Galaxy's headquarters, his voice sharp through the speaker system. He didn't waste time. Who wrote this code, he asked. Not a polite preamble, not a question wrapped in diplomacy, just the blunt edge of truth. Metadata doesn't lie. Every comment, every encryption string, every placeholder name carried my fingerprints, my habit of naming dummy variables after old jazz musicians, the encryption pattern that only I used, even the silly password fluffernutter42 buried in a mock test environment. They were all mine, scattered like breadcrumbs through the system. The silence in that boardroom was thick enough to choke on. Finally. Chase cleared his throat and muttered something about strategic oversight. He tried to frame himself as the conductor, waving his hands while the orchestra played. Marcus didn't buy it. Oversight. You renamed a dashboard tab and broke the environment. That's not oversight. That's vandalism. The word landed like a hammer. Caroline Blake, one of the firm's sharpest investors, cut in next. Her voice, crisp and lethal, sliced through Chase's stammering. You replaced your principal engineer with a surname. And now the deal is collapsing under the weight of that decision. Ethan told me later the room shifted after that. Executives whispering behind their hands, some leaning toward Chase with anger, others already distancing themselves. The fracture lines were forming, visible to anyone who cared to look. I didn't need to be in that room to feel it. Nyxora was cracking from the inside, the glossy paint peeling to reveal the rot underneath. And 2 hours later, Ethan pinged me again. Galaxy wasn't just questioning the demo anymore, they were reconsidering Nyxora altogether. The message came in the simplest form possible, a direct call from Marcus Hayes. No assistants, no middle managers, no polite layers of corporate varnish, just his voice, calm and deliberate. I want you to lead this project, he said, independently, on your terms. The contract will be 9 months, $420,000. Scope defined by you. For a moment, I couldn't speak. It wasn't the money, it was the clarity. They weren't asking Nyxora anymore. They were asking me. The deal wasn't paused. It was extracted, lifted clean out of the Whitmans' hands. I'll review it, I replied, though the answer was already written in my chest. Back at Nyxora, panic spread like a virus. The investor channels hummed with muted fury. Diane's emails dripped with false cheer, lines like, "Let's stay solutions-focused," pasted between desperate questions. Chase stalked the halls, red-faced, barking about fixing optics, and Robert Whitman himself had stormed into the office that morning, his voice echoing through glass doors. At my apartment, the doorbell became a ritual. Couriers with envelopes, florists with elaborate bouquets, all holding symbols of an empire realizing too late what it had lost. Apologies filled my inbox, 3 paragraphs of contrition here, a misunderstanding there. Then came the padded consulting offers retroactive titles, performance bonuses, even a chance to guide Chase more closely. I let the flowers rot in their vases. I stacked the envelopes in a corner. Unopened. I didn't even touch the NDAs they begged me to sign. I owed them nothing, not even the courtesy of a reply. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with a mug of tea and opened the contract Marcus had sent. My name sat at the top, my rate beside it. My terms written in language that finally recognized what I was worth. I signed without hesitation. And by Monday morning, Nyxora would learn what it meant to lose the heart of their system while pretending they still had control. By the time Monday arrived, the facade was crumbling faster than they could patch it. Robert Whitman stormed into investor calls red-faced, his voice booming through speakerphones across the office, insisting the deal was temporarily delayed. No one believed him. Caroline Blake cut through the noise with surgical precision. This isn't a pause. This is an extraction. Galaxy has already moved on. Her words left no room for argument, and the silence that followed was heavier than any rebuttal. Chase tried drafting excuses, layering jargon onto half-truths, but each new email sounded more desperate than the last. Investors weren't reading them anymore. Diane Mercer resigned quietly, slipping her badge into an envelope and leaving it on Robert's desk without so much as a goodbye. By midweek, Chase had been stripped of his title, the brass plate outside his office taken down as if it had never existed. Robert's empire wavered on its foundations. Contracts in progress stalled, smaller clients began to reconsider their commitments, and the stock price slid as whispers of incompetence became public knowledge. The Whitman name, once wielded like a weapon, now rang hollow in every meeting room it entered. Meanwhile, my own work moved forward. I restored a clean copy of the system on Galaxy's secure servers, stripped of Nexora's chaos, focused entirely on performance and clarity. The code responded like it had been waiting for this moment, streamlined, alive, and free of meddling hands. I didn't leak a word to the press. I didn't boast on social media. I didn't need to. The system itself was my voice, and Marcus Hayes made sure it was heard where it mattered most. Nexora was unraveling under its own arrogance while I simply kept building, stronger and steadier than before. By Friday, their boardroom had turned into a battlefield. Mine, however, was just a quiet apartment filled with the steady hum of a machine that finally belonged to me alone. And then came the knock at my door. I brewed a cup of Earl Grey and carried it to the window as the knock came. A courier stood on my porch in an oversized blazer, clutching a leather folder like it was radioactive. I didn't move. He knocked again, then pressed the doorbell twice. My tea steamed in my hand, lemon slice floating at the top, the quiet hum of my apartment drowning out his urgency. Eventually, the sprinklers clicked on. Water sprayed across the lawn, soaking the envelope balanced on top of the folder. The ink began to blur, the leather darkening as it absorbed the spray. Still, I stayed where I was. I watched as the courier shifted nervously, took a photo for proof, and walked back to his car. The folder sat there, dripping under the late afternoon sun, its contents ruined before they could ever reach me. Minutes later, an email pinged into my inbox. It was from Marcus Hayes. Just one line they'll beg with flowers, apologies, and papers. Do not open the door. See you Monday. I closed the message and clicked on my inbox filter. Every Nexora thread, dozens of them lit up in a single sweep. Subject lines like, "We value your contributions and let's discuss a new chapter" disappeared as I hit delete. The screen went blank, silent, clean. Leaning back, I let the calm wash over me. Revenge hadn't come from sabotage, from tearing down code or burning bridges. It had come from building something no one else could touch, from knowing exactly where the power sat and refusing to hand over the key. They tried to steal it, and instead they crashed against the walls I built. I sipped my tea, the taste steady and sharp. The empire that once dismissed me was collapsing under its own arrogance, while I walked away with everything they had tried to claim, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a ghost in someone else's machine. I felt untouchable.